All right, welcome back to the channel. So Jermall Charlo, according to Eddie Hearn, must fight Demetrius Andrade in order to get a fight with Canelo Alvarez. That sounds like an obvious ploy to me, but at the same time, it's worth talking about because there's real reasons that Canelo Alvarez should be fighting these guys, and they are definitely related to legacy. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to talk about Canelo Alvarez, Demetrius Andrade, and Jermall Charlo. Three fighters who are all in the same weight class, 154 pounds, at the same time, but never have fought each other despite them all being some of the best fighters in the world. And not just Canelo, but Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo are both two of the best fighters in the world. Eddie Hearn was asked a question and said, and the question was, if the fight between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant at 168 pounds fall apart, is there any chance that we'll get a Canelo Alvarez fight with Jermall Charlo? Now, the reason that he's asking this is because Eddie Hearn sounds like he acts as a mouthpiece for DAZN and tells you, what DAZN's opinion of these fights are, right? So, according to Eddie Hearn, what really needs to happen is Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo need to fight each other, and then the winner of that fight would be in position to get a Canelo Alvarez fight. I think that if anybody believes that nonsense, you're absolutely nuts, because Canelo Alvarez was ducking him before, or that fight wasn't being made before. Why in the world would anybody believe that DAZN would be able to do it now? In fact, Demetrius Andrade was what held the WBO belt, and Canelo Alvarez held the other 3 championship belts all at the same time. And Eddie Hearn specifically said, no, DAZN doesn't really want that fight between Canelo Alvarez and Demetrius Andrade. Said it right after the fight where Demetrius Andrade won the belt, right? Now, the guy that he won the belt from was in the fight that he won the belt. It was for a vacant belt. And why was the belt vacant? Because a guy named Billy Joe Saunders was stripped of his championship because he tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, and as a result, he had to move up to 168. What did he get? He got the fight with Canelo Alvarez. No fight for Demetrius Andrade for undisputed, but Billy Joe Saunders gets one at 168 pounds. Look, if a fight isn't for if one of those two fighters, Demetrius Andrade or Jermall Charlo, really are the last fighter where Canelo Alvarez, if he fought him, would become undisputed, and then he doesn't fight him, I don't want to hear it. He's just not interested in fighting him, or at least his camps are not fighting him. But this is the reason why I think that Canelo Alvarez should fight these guys. Refusing that shot at an undisputed against Demetrius Andrade, and you have now people like Canelo, like Terrence Crawford and other people just are pointing out the obvious, man. It looks like Canelo Alvarez doesn't want to fight black fighters, or his camp doesn't want him to fight black fighters, or at least the good black fighters in these heavier weight classes. I know he didn't have a problem fighting black fighters at 154 pounds, at least when he was with still fighting on Showtime. But ever since he went to HBO, he's just not been doing that. And that is a huge hit on this guy's record, man. And it's something that is gonna stand out over time. And it's something that I think, because I honestly think that Canelo Alvarez is a good guy, and that I believe that his camp are good people, man. I like Eddie Renaud, so there's nothing that I see in him that necessarily tells me that, oh, he doesn't want to do that just because these fighters are black. But look, the style of these fighters, it seems like they might be worried about, because he's had problems in the past with guys like Erislandy Lara and guys like Austin Trout. Many people thought Canelo Alvarez lost to Austin Trout, or no, many people thought that Canelo Alvarez lost to Erislandy Lara, and there's a good number of people that thought he lost to Austin Trout. I think there was a knockdown in the fight for me that gave Canelo Alvarez that fight, but Canelo Alvarez at 154 pounds was not looking like he was some invincible fighter. And the fighters that he's fighting now, I mean, it's almost a joke at this point in time. I don't care how many people say positive things about the fights. When you're fighting guys like Rocky Fielding, you're fighting, a worn out old Sergey Kovalev. They're just not Billy Joe Saunders. And now you're gonna fight Caleb Plant. It looks to most reasonable people as if there's a style that you're skipping out on. And if you're looking at the way that Canelo Alvarez has been fighting lately, he's been fighting very flat-footed and very come forward. That flat-footed come forward style is going to have a lot of problems with a guy that can hit, a guy that moves very well, and somebody that is as good a boxer as Canelo Alvarez is. I believe that Canelo Alvarez is one of the best fighters in the world, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other fighters that have a skill set that is where they may be able to overcome Canelo Alvarez. But at the very least, man, he needs to fight these guys for his legacy and also just for fairness in boxing, man. Like, there was a guy, Roy Jones Jr. was famous for saying this. He was like, if there was anybody in my weight class that acted like or thought that they were better than me, he would go out of his way to go fight him. He did that and it ultimately it wound up in him having a loss against Antonio Tarver and Glenn Johnson. But still, he was willing to fight anybody that was in his weight class that said that he was a better fighter than him. And his legacy has really not suffered as a result of that. There are other great fighters like Muhammad Ali that fought everybody in their weight division. And that is just something that Canelo Alvarez is not doing. We can talk about how good he looks and how good he looks against the opposition that he's fighting, but if anybody really thinks Billy Joe Saunders is anything other than an A-level domestic fighter over there in the UK, I'm sorry, I just do not see it. He had one good win against David Lemieux, a flat-footed dude from Canada that, I almost want to say who isn't going to beat anybody on that world-class level is going to be David Lemieux. David Lemieux he's a hard puncher. He's a come-forward hard puncher, but just doesn't have the skill set, doesn't have the talent to beat a top-notch fighter. So I just don't give a lot of credit to Canelo Alvarez for beating Billy Joe Saunders. And I'm definitely not going to give him any credit for beating Rocky Fielding or beating Callum Smith. I mean, these fights are just fights that are where it's obvious that Eddie Hearn and DAZN have a stable of fighters that they want to get work. And, hey, I guess that's good, but no. So, I mean, the long and the short of it is that I would love to see Jermall Charlo fight Demetrius Andrade. But the problem is that fight, as far as getting fights with the other guys in the division or actually getting some type of recognition out there, it's not going to do anything. And this is something that Ronnie Shields said, but I'm going to co-sign this. It's not going to do them any good knowing the media, the boxing media, and how they operate. The winner, say Demetrius Andrade beats Jermall Charlo, all Demetrius Andrade is going to do is continue to get avoided, and they're going to make excuses about how Jermall Charlo wasn't that good of a fighter. Same thing goes for Jermall Charlo. And then the loser, of course, And say it's a great fight, but somebody has to lose. So say Demetrius Andrade loses just to make it even. Then what? He's just not going to get any fight against anybody. You know what I mean? So he loses his belt, and then they're definitely not going to be able to make any. They're not going to make any good fights for him. So it's just all kind of messed up, and that's why I put it just on Canelo Alvarez's shoulders. Look, man, you need to do what's right. You know, Jermall Charlo's been in the same division as you for your entire career, and moving up to say that you're going to fight for undisputed against Caleb Plant, like that's super important to you, while you skipped out on it when you had the chance to do it at 160 with Demetrius Andrade. It just doesn't carry a lot of weight. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.